power of Nanchao ruled over the area across the mountains to the east, in what is today the lofty province of Yunnan in western China. For years, the kings of Nanchao had set their sights on the rich river valley of the Irrawaddy. The year was 832. Around the world at this time, the Byzantine Empire, the last remaining part of what had been the Roman Empire, was fighting for its life against increasingly confident Arab empires, inspired by the young religion of Islam. In the Mayan lowlands of southern Mexico, the last king of the soaring city of Copan, a man named Ukit-Tuk, was commissioning a stone monument that would never be finished, because his entire society was collapsing under the pressures of drought and warfare, and the population was fleeing the city. In what is today France, King Pepin I of Aquitaine and his brother Louis the German revolted against their father, the Frankish Emperor Louis the Pious, the son of Charlemagne. And in the mountains of southern China, the armies of Nanchao marched out to conquer the lands of Burma. At that time, the society occupying the dry zone around the Irrawaddy was a people who are remembered as the Pew. Exactly who the Pew were and what they called themselves, we have little idea. It seems they spoke a language of the Sino-Tibetan family and lived in a loosely connected group of 5 city-states in the valley of the Irrawaddy. Their culture was heavily influenced by trade with India. In the preceding centuries, they had imported Buddhism, as well as other Indian cultural concepts, architectural styles, and political structures, and they had based their writing system on the Indian Brahmi script. One 9th century Chinese text, known as the Manchu, or the Book of Southern Barbarians, records the Chinese impressions of this land and the Pew people who lived there.
To the south of Yongchang City, one first passes beyond the lands of the Tang Empire to Phoenix blue jungles, then to vast skies, then to clearings. There lie huge rivers and settlements. They live in multi-storied houses, without city walls, sometimes painting their teeth, always dressing in untreated cloth with rattan worn about their waist, red silk cloth wrapped about their top knot, and other hair hanging behind in a decorative fashion. Peacocks nest in nearby trees, and elephants are as large as water buffalo. The locals customarily raise elephants to till the fields and burn their dung as fuel.
The armies of Nanchao marched through the narrow mountain passes, thickly carpeted with forest, and swept through the Burmese lowlands on a series of devastating raids, taking both plunder and slaves.
In the 10th year of the Zhenyuan era, Nanchao sought out and attacked them. On the 21st day of the 12th month of the 3rd year of the Xiantong era, at the cliffs of the Suli River, some 2,000 to 3,000 troops massed.
According to ancient sources, the Nanchao deported many thousands of the Pew people who lived and farmed in this fertile valley and sent them away into slavery. Among the troops of Nanchao were a group of cavalry warriors from a people known as the Mien, a small ethnic tribe from the high plateaus who spoke an ancestor of what would become the Burmese language. But these troops had dreams of going their own way, and once they had tasted freedom in the valley of the Irrawaddy, they had no desire to return to Nanchao. Used to life in the rocky mountain plateaus of the north, the arid plains of Burma were a familiar ecology to them, and with the native population there devastated by the Nanchao raids, their lands were there for the taking. The Mien broke away from the kingdom of Nanchao and decided to settle in this new land, and ultimately they would found a kingdom there. Other historians contest that the Burmese speakers already existed in the valley, and that they were part of the Piao people, and had nothing to do with the Nanchao raids. But as with everything in these early stages of the Chronicles, we're left with a hazy fog of contradictions and uncertainties, and the answer actually may have been a mix of both. On the other side of the world at the same time, sea-going Norsemen from Scandinavia were arriving in great numbers on the shores of eastern England, sometimes as raiders, sometimes as settlers, and sometimes as refugees. And over the next century, they would come to topple the Saxon kingdoms that ruled there. And as they did so, they would plant a distinctly Norse character on the people of England and the English language that emerged from them. I think it's possible that the Burmese people then settling in the Irrawaddy Valley may have arrived in similarly complex circumstances and formed a similar hybrid culture with the people who lived there. With much of this matter concealed in the fog of history, what we can say with some certainty is that around the year 849, just 17 years after the date given to the Nanchao raids, the Mien built a walled fortress at a place on the eastern bank of the Irrawaddy River, a place that would later come to be known as Bagan.
Shall aid you.
The chosen location for the city of Bagan owed much to the geography of the land around it. It seems to have been built on the ruins of a previous settlement belonging to the Pew people, and stood on a sizable bend in the meandering course of the Irrawaddy River. The settlement had easy access to water and was surrounded by countryside that would be the most fertile and productive of all Myanmar for the next 500 years. Part of the reason for this was the region's violent geological history. Around 50 kilometers to the southeast of Bagan was a great dormant volcano named Mount Popa. This volcanic cone, covered in thick forest and shaded bamboo groves, is a sacred site that for centuries has been the focal point of worship for the people of Burma. Southwest of Mount Popa is Taung Kalat, or Pedestal Hill, a striking, sheer-sided volcanic plug which rises more than 650 meters above sea level, and where a Buddhist monastery now sits, towering over the forested landscape below. Mount Popa has long been believed to be the home of powerful spirits that the Burmese call Nats, and the worship of these spirits has always existed alongside Buddhist religious practices in a complex relationship. While this soaring mountain rising out of the flat plain has long captured the imaginations and religious sensibilities of the people, it was also partly to thank for the success of their society. The ash that volcanoes spew out during their eruptions is rich in elements such as iron, magnesium, and potassium, minerals that are crucial for the healthy growth of plants. When volcanic rock and ash weather and leach into the soil, these elements are released. And so, combined with the fertility of the silty soil along the river itself and the plentiful water supply, this meant that the soils in this region were immensely productive, and the people of Bagan were able to conduct 2 bountiful rice harvests per year and grow other crops like pulses, sesamum, cucumbers, and millet. On the spot that they'd chosen for their new city, the Mien built a thick and high wall out of brick. And they built it according to the traditions of Buddhist cosmology and numerology. The inner wall of Bagan was broken by 12 gates to represent the 12 signs of the zodiac, with 4 main gates at each of the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. The walled area of the city wasn't huge, little over a square kilometre in fact, but the walls contained only the palaces of the kings and the headquarters of his administration. Outside this fortified centre, a sprawling city would soon grow up around it, much of it built out of teak and bamboo that has left little trace in the archaeological record. By the mid-10th century, a king was in place in Bagan, although we don't know the exact names and dates for these early kings. One 9th century Arab traveller to India and Burma, named Suleiman Nadwi, wrote an account of the powerful army that one king of Burma fielded.
They say that when he marches to battle, he is accompanied by about 50,000 elephants. He campaigns only in winter. Indeed, his elephants cannot stand thirst, and so they can go forth only in winter. They say that in his army, even the washermen amounted between 10 and 15,000.
Thanks to the ongoing study of inscriptions, we do know the names of at least 2 kings who ruled around the turn of the first millennium, Nyang U Saurahan and Kiang Pi Min, both of whom were once considered to be legendary. By the year 1004, a Chinese source from the Song dynasty records an ambassador arriving from what they called the Pu'ukan kingdom, which is thought to refer to Bagan. And it seems this ambassador was seeking recognition from Song China, which was then considered the great power in the region, suggesting that the kingdom of Bagan was now confident enough to look outwards and assert itself to its neighbours. But reliable sources on these early kings are extremely thin and all mixed up with legend. The first king of Bagan who steps out of the historical record in full colour would not come for another half-century. He was long considered the founder of the Bagan Empire, and although we now know that it was likely in existence for 2 centuries or so before his reign, he is arguably its first great king, and certainly the king who would lead it to new and glorious heights. He was a man named Anaurata. Anaurata's early life was one of upheaval and family conflict. His father was the king, but he had been a usurper on the throne of Bagan, having overthrown the previous king in a rebellion. and like most usurpers, Anawrata's father lived in constant fear of one day being overthrown himself. Anawrata grew up as a prince in the palace, with his two older stepbrothers, men named Kizo and Sokate. These brothers were actually the sons of the previous king, but Anawrata's father had adopted them and raised them as his own, and so they grew up together. But his older stepbrothers, Kizo and Sokate, always treated the younger Anawrata as though he were an inferior, something that must have rankled the young prince. And it's clear that these two brothers also dreamed of one day reclaiming some of the glory that their adoptive father had stolen from them. While he was still a boy, Anawrata's treacherous brothers plotted a coup to overthrow his now aging father, as the Glass Palace Chronicle recalls.
When Kizo and Sokate came of age, they built a pleasant monastery and said to King Kunsor, "Come and call thy blessings on the monastery." And the king took no heed, nor scrutiny, but hearkened to them. And Kizo and Sokate seized the king and threatened him and made him become a monk. And they spread the rumor far and wide that the king, in his zeal for bliss hereafter, had become a monk.
This palace coup must have scandalized the royal court, and despite the relative commonness of coups of this kind, the historians of Burma are clear in their view on it. The Glass Palace Chronicle recounts how a number of evil omens accompanied this shocking act.
About the time of his fall, a miracle was seen in the Pato Pagoda. The Friday star trampled on the moon. The moon was a full circle on the second day of waxing. The earth quaked 7 days. The water stood still in the river.
First, the brother named Kizo ruled as king, but the chronicles recall that he was killed one day by a hunter who mistook him for a deer.
He built a royal box in the marshes of the Chinwin and visited the 10 villages of Bangyi, hunting deer. One day a hunter lay waiting for famine at the place where they drank water. The king likewise came to the spot to wait for deer, and the hunter knew not that it was the king, but shot with the bow and hit him, that he died. He passed at the age of 28. About the time of his death, an ogre laughed for a full half-month and threw stones at the palace.
After this unfortunate accident, the other treacherous brother Sokate took the throne. And it's perhaps not unreasonable to wonder whether this story of the hunter accidentally killing the king might actually be a polite way for the chroniclers to get around the fact that the new king had actually had his brother Kizo assassinated. Through all of this upheaval and treachery, the boy Anawrata seems to have simply got on with things. He was allowed to keep his royal status at court and to live there with his mother, and in exchange he attended to the two kings, who had overthrown his father and taken away the throne that would one day have been his. But when Anawrata had reached the age of 30, King Sokate took things too far. He referred to Anawrata at court using the word Nita Naungme, a compound word that means something like brother-son. Confused by this, Anawrata travelled to the monastery where his father had been exiled and asked him what it meant. To the old, embittered former king, the meaning of this was clear. Sokate intended to marry Anawrata's mother.
Anawrata told that word to his father, King Gyeongbyu, and his father said, "Because he wishes to take thy mother, thus he speaks." And Anawrata was exceedingly angry, and he begged for the horse and weapons and gear that Sakra gave his father. And his father gave him the Arendama lance, the Thilawunta sword, the ruby ring, and the ruby hairpin.
It's hard to know whether Anawrata was truly motivated by his mother's honour, or whether he had been planning this the whole time and had just now found a convenient excuse. Whatever the case, Anawrata rose in rebellion against his stepbrother. He fled to the holy volcano, Mount Popa, and marshalled his forces there, gathering lords and chieftains who had had enough of the brothers' treacherous antics. Then he marched on the capital of Bagan. The Glass Palace Chronicle records what happened next.
Now, when he had mustered his forces, he marched on Bagan and sent a message to his brother saying, "Will you give up the throne, or will you do battle?" And when Sokate heard the words of his younger brother, he was exceedingly wrathful and answered, His mother's milk is yet wet upon his lips, and he says he will fight me. Let all my ministers look on. I will fight him, man to man, on horseback. When Anorata heard his brother's words, he was glad. And when the appointed day was come, he took the lance and sword his father had given him, and mounted the demon horse, and came to the stream of Tamati. And Socate his brother saw him coming, and went forth to meet him. Then said Anorata, Brother, you the elder strike first. And Socate thrust at him with his lance, but Anorata parried it with the Arendama lance, and it reached not his body, but pierced the pommel of his saddle. And when Socate saw it, he was sore afraid and trembled. Then said Anorata, Brother, your turn is over. Now it is mine. Meet it as best you can. And he smote him and pierced him with the Arendama lance, so that it went in at the front and came out behind. And Socate's horse ran away with him to the river, and there he died.
This encounter, as rendered in the Glass Palace Chronicle, feels like something out of the Arthurian legends, complete with chivalric duels, legendary weapons of great power, and the fight to save a woman's honor. We would be foolish to take it at face value as a historical source, but it does give us a sense for the turbulent political landscape of medieval Myanmar, and what must have seemed like the clashing of great heroic forces, the stuff of medieval romances, of myth and poetry. With his brother defeated, Anorata took the throne. The chronicle records that Anorata was riven with guilt over the death of his brother, and attempted to soothe his conscience with the construction of great temples and works of infrastructure throughout the kingdom.
Anorata could not sleep for full 6 months because he had slain his elder brother. Then Sakra visited him with a dream, saying, King, if thou wouldst mitigate thine evil deed in sinning against thine elder brother, build many pagodas, monasteries and rest houses, and share the merit with thine elder brother. Devise thou many wells, ponds, dams and ditches, fields and canals, and share the merit with thine elder brother.
Archaeological evidence does show that Anorata was indeed a prolific builder. Soon after coming to the throne in the
Shattered. My power wanes. Gather more gems or face my wrath. Metal spiders, destroy them. Deliver gems of power to my altar. Enemy defeat. Double kill. Triple kill. Keep destroyed. Hero of the storm. Well done.
The year 1044, he marched into the north to secure the northern border and built 43 forts along the Irrawaddy River. The north was traditionally the gateway to Burma, the lands through which all potential conquerors had previously marched, and so it's clear he was keen to secure his land from invasion. King Anorata built his network of fortresses as an armoured corridor that protected the valuable farmlands of the north and allowed his army